Right, now we start with session 1, and this is to do with keynote speakers. Where are we, and how to increase Satcom market share. So the first paper is by Karl Keppke. Is he here? Karl, where are you? Hello. There we go. And it's entitled Data-Led Intelligence for Enhanced Bandwidth Powering a Next Generation In-Flight Entertainment Experience. Karl Keppke of Global Eagle.
Thank you, Barry. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to be in front of you and talk about a subject. And I'd like to thank Profen for the opportunity of also attending this session. So we're going to be talking a little bit about in-flight connectivity and exactly the role data plays in in-flight connectivity. So just to give you a bit of background, Global Eagle is a global company. We have 3 parts of our business: aviation, maritime, and land. Aviation side is commercial airlines. We supply in-flight connectivity, content, and media. So if you've flown any of the Middle Eastern airlines, Qatar, Etihad, Emirates, or any of those airlines, all the content, in other words, the movies, the TV shows, the audio, the e-books, everything on that comes from Global Eagle. That's what we supply to these airlines, commercial airlines, and we supply about 2/3 of the airlines in the world with content and media. And in-flight connectivity is what we're going to be talking about as well. And then on the maritime side, we supply a huge amount of data to super yachts, which is a very specialized market, and cruise ships, where we supply up to 800 megabits per cruise ship for internet access to passengers on these cruise ships. But here's a couple of our customers that we have. You'll note on the top left, Turkish Airlines, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. With Profen, we've been very fortunate, and we're proud to announce that we, 3 weeks ago, were awarded the contract with Turkish Airlines for a significant part of their fleet to supply in-flight connectivity. So hopefully in a year's time, you'll be flying with great internet on Turkish Airlines with a new SLA and a great experience brought to you by Global Eagle and Profen, proudly Turkish content as well. So on the right-hand side, obviously, we have cruise ships and so on. But I think what I'm trying to get to is that we have a certain mission. This is Turkish Airlines. This is their fleets, the routes that they fly that we need to cover with in-flight connectivity. And it's a typical satellite overlay that we have across that network. And there are a couple of things that will jump out to you. The one is that it's not a simple single satellite solution. It's multiple satellites, multiple beams per satellite, and also routes that cover a large geographic region. And when you start looking at a hub around Ankara or in Istanbul, you will also see that the flight density is super high. So you can't have a single solution for every aircraft in every part of the network. So some routes have 1 flight a day, some routes have multiple flights. And when you get within Ankara and Istanbul, you'll have 40, 50, 60 flights in the same region, in the same geographic region flying. And the airline has signed up an SLA that requires a certain committed information rate per aircraft and a committed experience to the customer. So the way we solve it is we monitor, we collect, and we measure data, a lot of it. We actually monitor everything on board the aircraft continuously. We monitor it live and bring the data down over the satellite network. Now, clearly, you can't bring down all the data at the same time because you're going to start impacting the service that you're offering to the end users, which is really what you should be looking at. But what we do as well is once the aircraft is landed, we use a GSM link, a 4G link, an LTE link, and download tons of data on that particular flight. And then we aggregate the data and we start looking at it. And one of the items that we look at, apologies, is what we call the customer experience value. And it's an empirical value that we measure on a continuous basis, and we measure it every 5 minutes for every device of every user all the time. And we measure the data and we collect it, and then we post-process the data in a fashion that I'll show you now. So when we start looking at it, it's also non-intrusive, so we don't actually affect the performance of the link. But we start looking at response times, latencies, throughput, authentication delays, retries. We do DPI, deep packet inspection of the data. And in actual fact, we look at the entire TCP connection. And if you look at the top, we do that in 5-minute chunks. We then go down to what a user experience is, and we then we push it up into a flight experience, so we can actually measure exactly what happened on the flight. And then we'll do it on a transponder basis or an airline basis or a geographic basis, because once you have the data, you can cut and slice and dice the data any way you need to. But we then use that data in a fashion there where we build up the customer experience. So we look at different elements in the browsing experience, and we build up a browsing CE. So it's a customer experience value that for the browsing, and for the more technical people, you'll see that it's broken down even further. So we measure different elements of the browsing. That browsing is then taken to a next level where we build it up with additional information on the FTPs and the applications that people use, and you end up with a final CE score. Now, the most important part is the browsing part of it, because the browsing part is what actually determines whether a customer has a good or a bad or a mediocre experience. And what we obviously want is an experience, it's a value of 0 to 5. So you obviously want to get as high as possible during a flight. And then you also have a couple other things where it's important to track. But at the end of the day, you end up with a graph like this. So this is in time on a particular flight. So we can see exactly what happened on the flight and the varying customer experience that you experience on the flight. And as you looked at the slide before on the satellite footprint, you're obviously moving from one footprint to another footprint. So you actually have a potential point where you hand over between satellites. So you can actually try and figure out what is good and what is bad. Do you have enough capacity on a particular site, a particular footprint of a satellite, or do you not? And it's important because at the end of the day, it's perception of the service that's important and what people do with the service. The second element that we do is we do network resource management. So network resource management is a traffic acceleration platform which controls and optimizes the passenger experience. And what I mean with that is we start looking at what people are looking at. We do intelligent traffic management, so we will differentiate between browsing, social media, FTPs, people that watch Netflix, Hulu on airlines, because we are finding people starting to use streaming services on aircraft as well. So it's very important to keep that in mind and be able to manage that. So when you start looking at exactly what people are using on aircraft, you'll find that about 35% is background stuff like cloud, iCloud, Android, Microsoft background data. 20% is made up of people streaming, and 45% is interactive and social media business. And what we're also now finding airlines doing is that they want differentiated services. So they start looking at passengers that are in economy and differentiating the service they receive to the people that are sitting in business class and first class. So it's important that you start having the tools and the mechanisms to manage that interface. So again, it's maximizing the experience. It's looking at how you can do it and do it cost effective, because at the end of the day, what is important to an airline is the cost, and dollars per person, per flight makes a difference to the airline. So it's super important that you're able to have a great network, good performance at a reasonable cost to the passenger. So at the end of the day, we have data that leads our network configuration. We have data that leads our network monitoring and our network analysis and actually drives our SLA. Because the airlines are no longer are amenable to just looking at, oh, he got a good service or he didn't get a good service. We actually have to supply them the SLA down to flight level, per aircraft, per month, and we get penalized or rewarded based on the performance of that particular satellite. So if we don't have the data, then we have no means of actually doing the measurement. And at the end of the day, we can supply the data to the airline and supply them information about what happened on their network, what the customer experience score was for a particular flight, go back in the flight and figure out why a particular person had issues with browsing or receiving his email. So the bottom line message really is if you don't have the data and you can't measure it, then you can't manage. But if you have the data, use the data and use the data to drive the way your network is configured, drive the way your network configuration is done, and how you manage the interface. So thank you very much, Barry.